Are you ready?
Yes.
And 3.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Unapologetic Truth. Today we'll be sitting up with Christian Brown, my 10-year-old son. Say hello, son.
Hi.
So today, today and on other days, we have done some podcasts to get a little more in-depth picture of who I am. And I thought that how else better to get a look into who I am than to spend a little time chopping it up with all of you, i.e. your dad, your brother, and your sister. So this is part of that. So we both agreed that we were going to prepare and have a question ready for the other one, right?
Yeah.
So my question, obviously, I'm going to start first, is to you, is your brother and sister always giving you a hard time about not only being the baby, but also growing up much differently than they grew up, having things much better than they had, probably up until the point of age 10. So how do you feel about that? What are your thoughts? Have you ever really thought that through, or besides their stories or anything like that? Tell me a little bit about that.
I think that since they're older than me, they have it's been like a different time, and you having problems with having a house and having stuff that you can actually provide for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that now you have probably a better job, you know, and now you have other people and yourself to have money and provide stuff for not just me but other people.
Okay. So when they tell you those things, do you only equate it to the materialistic things that we had? Or do you think about how they also tease you about mom being much more strict with them than I am with you?
Yes, I do think it's different. You treat them and me as in a different way. Maybe because I'm the youngest, or maybe because I'm not. But just I feel like that you shouldn't treat me different than them.
Mm-hmm.
But since we're in a different situation and different areas and where we're at, that it's kind of different for me and them, because we were in so different time we're in, and good situations and bad situations.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from that, from where I'm at right now, that it might just be a different act that you need to do.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Okay, a different act. So
Not a different act, as in bad, but since we're in different situations, usually when you would, if Janessa did bad to maybe Isaiah, was just playing around, and then something went bad, and you would get mad at the both of them, it would kind of be different because it would be me alone.
okay.
If
I get that.
makes sense.
So what you're saying is when I was disciplining them when they were younger, the two of them were closer in age.
Yes.
Yeah, and they were doing something. But when I discipline you, it's typically you by yourself, apart from them,
Apart from my friends, yeah.
Oh, and apart from your friends.
Because
Okay.
usually I get in trouble because it's not because of my friends, but I'm usually with my friends because Isaiah and Janessa are not my age.
Right.
Because just them two were together, since they're older, that I don't really hang with them like that.
Yeah.
You know, how they would,
Right.
how me and them would now.
Okay.
So I think now it's different ages, it's farther apart.
Right.
You get it?
Yeah, so clearly there's going to be a much larger gap.
Yes.
They were raised not only closer together, but in a different time together.
Yeah.
So they experienced, or all three of us experienced, what was going on at that time together. Okay. Okay. So I can kind of see that, because I feel like we were always a unit. The three of us always operated as a unit because we didn't have a choice. But it's the same way now. We just have a much larger unit, a much larger support system that moves with us and in support of us. So I could scale back a little bit with you. With the two of them, obviously everyone else helped me raise them. I was mom, I was dad, and there was times that I needed, their uncles, my uncle, or other family members or friends to help support them. So I know that you've heard us talk about it takes a village to raise a family, and that was true then, and that's true now. Right? Okay. Want to move to your question for me?
Yes, I think how would you move around with Janessa and Isaiah when, from all the stories that you told me about y'all being homeless? How would you get around, go somewhere, and then having, because how sometimes, you would leave, and Janessa and Isaiah would take care of me, or Isaiah, or Dad? How did
that work for them?
Yes.
Because I didn't have Dad. Okay.
Since you didn't have more people, a bigger unit.
Okay. It was very difficult. We did it a number of things, a number of ways, different ways. And typically the way that I moved or we moved differently was really based on what the situation was at that time. So what I mean by that is before we were even homeless, the difficulty came with sometimes having to live outside of my means when it came to picking a home in Texas. Your brother and sister are obviously different genders, and a lot of lease agreements, if you had, and a lease agreement is somewhere that once you find a place that you like to live and you can afford to live there, that then you sign a lease agreement that basically states that you agree to stay from this time to this time, and you agree to a certain set of rules in living there. And part of those rules were the fact that because your brother and sister were siblings of a different gender, that they required each one of them to have their own bedroom. So, and that was also an issue at most of the homeless shelters. I had a fear of being in kind of an open environment with a young boy and a young girl. And, even in those times, that was something that you had to be fearful of. It's always been something you had to be fearful of: kidnapping, sexual abuse, things like that. So it's almost like you're trying to escape physical abuse, and you don't want to put your kids or yourself in a situation to heighten or add a level of abuse. So that made it very difficult. So before we were even homeless, it was always difficult for me as a one-income household to take care of everything that your brother and sister needed. So before we were ever even homeless, there would be times that I would have to cut corners, and I would take any job. I wasn't above having a certain type of job, or I wasn't out there looking for a specific job. Mommy would accept jobs, any job that would help me get them through that day, that next week.
And make money to get your food and water.
Absolutely. So there was times that, because we had a car, that was our home, I would pick what I perceived to be safe places for us to sleep in the car at night. So that would mean a church parking lot. Sometimes it would mean if I could get away with it, sleeping in my own church parking lot. My own church home was a safe haven for us in a lot of ways. But sometimes I feared them coming to the church on the weekends, or, it's being in a part of a church, a congregation means church service. You're providing a service to people, and that's not just on Sundays. So sometimes I had a fear and anxiety of going to sleep and waking up, and one of my, church family members saw us sleeping in the parking lot and things like that. And it wasn't really a fear that I thought they were going to do something bad. It was just that pride, that sinfulness, those things that happen when you've lost faith and your mind starts to trick you and play those games with your head. Yeah. So sometimes if it wasn't a church parking lot, it was maybe a parking lot that was doing construction, so that I knew we didn't have to worry about a lot of traffic at night and things like that. It was just a number of things like that. There was days that I wouldn't eat, so that whatever money I had to allot for a meal for them, it would be separated between the two of them, and I would be, just have to tough it out. I was mom. I could make it as far as I could, as long as I could, without having a meal, if it meant that they got to split a meal evenly. They received the nourishment and the things that they needed. There was times that I worked graveyard, and I would have to sneak and take them to work and let them stay in the car at night. I used to try to park close where, they were right close to the front door, or close to where I could see them. Sometimes, unfortunately, is hard as it was to do it back then, I don't have any shame in admitting that now. But there was times that I would park, leave them in the car, and then once I knew everyone was gone and it was safe to bring them out, I would bring them out and hide them in the office with me, or another office across from me, things like that. So there was a lot of things that I did to try to make sure that we could survive.
And like how you said, like if you can put it in like a different office, was there anybody working around you in that job?
Not at night, not the jobs that I worked at night. There was a couple jobs that I worked at night that there was no one around, or I worked in plants. So I worked in kind of the office side of the plants that I worked in, and then there would just be warehouse or plant employees that had different parking in a different area where they communed for their breaks and things like that. So it was separate, and I could still kind of sneak under the radar.
And did you think of like going to like would y'all just eat in your car, or would you like go to the park or something?
We would go to the park sometimes. There was things that I would do to try to make it fun, to try to take the emotion and the sadness out of it.
Yeah.
Because it's not just that we're eating in our car because we don't have anywhere else to eat. So it's like, hey, let's go to the park, guys. We're going to go and have a picnic outside and things like that. Now, your brother and sister are certainly not silly, or they knew what was going on. But it just helped lighten the mood, help lighten the emotion, and take away some of the sadness from our situation, because even in that moment, we knew we were still blessed. We were blessed to still have each other. We were still blessed to survive the night. So, a picnic out at the park was something that was fun for us. We would figure something out. Yeah?
Yeah.
There was times that we would just go to a restaurant, and all I could afford to do was eat or get one huge meal, and we would all share it, things like that. But some people would say like, well, why did you go to a restaurant? So that my kids could feel some type of semblance of normality. So when your brother and sister tease you about that now, that's because there's some days that mom still, I will always live by a budget and maintain a budget and say, this is a wise purchase, this is not. But when you get to do some of the things that you get to do, they were not able to do that. And it wasn't just because of the abuse, it was because it was hard being a single mom. It was hard having to be able to find a job in the midst of still trying to gain my education and still make enough money that would pay for their daycare, which was quite expensive for 2 kids at that time. And once you paid for daycare, there was very little left. Or once you paid for, rent and groceries and utilities, then there was nothing left for daycare. So then they couldn't go to daycare.
And then that would include you going to your job and taking them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I think that you said it the best. There was a difference in the times. There was a difference in the support. And when we were in the abusive relationship, part of the abuse was being isolated from family and friends and things like that. So mom doesn't ever want you to think that there were people there that knew our situation and didn't help, because a lot of the times we didn't allow people to know what our situation was.
Tell people because it was so hard to express.
Yeah, it was hard to express. And not only that, your brother and sister caught a lot of flack and a lot of probably, for lack of a better word, maybe were bullied somewhat or made fun of. Not really bullied, but made fun of. And they lost a lot of friends at school because of our situation, because people could obviously see some of the things that were going on. So it made it very difficult for them. So mom had to navigate things differently with them, because the last thing I wanted to be was that stigma, right? So it was a bad thing. So I was a black single mother of 2 children. And that was difficult. And for the longest time, I was a black single mom of 3 children. So it made it very difficult to do things or operate in certain spaces, because I was afraid of being what people perceived to be something that was not worthy of any assistance, not worthy of support, not worthy of a lot of things that we indeed truly were worthy of. So when you have that mindset, it makes it difficult to not only live, but it made it difficult for your brother and sister to live, because they had to do a lot of things in secret. They had to do a lot of things differently. I had to handle myself differently when it came to them playing sports, when it came to them being in school activities. All of those things were different for them. Their experiences were different because of the situation and the decisions that mom had made. Yeah? Does it bother you to know some of those things? Do you feel like, do you realize how blessed you are? The things that you take for granted sometimes during the day are things that your brother and sister would never have even at that time probably dreamed of having.
But I think that sometimes I do act in the wrong situation, and I want different things and all that stuff when they didn't even have enough to need it or want it.
Yeah. But you do realize that that's not your fault, right?
Yes.
When they're teasing you, they are not only reminded of the blessings that we all now share together, but they still know that your brother and sister absolutely know that despite how rough those times were, that we were blessed through it. That there was people that didn't make it as far as we have made it. That didn't, even at that point, even in the bad situations we were in, they realized even in that how blessed we were, because it was important for mom to make them understand, or not even make them, help them understand that we're still good. So the days that we woke up in our car God, thank you that you kept us safe last night in the car from intruders, from someone maybe intending to do harm. Thank you. God, thank you that, we don't, say that again?
You said you had us wake up in another day.
Absolutely. Had another day that we
Anything
woke up
could've
together. Yeah, anything could have happened. I feel like that's making you sad right now.
No, because I think that now you're in a better place.
Absolutely. So that is part of some of the reasons why that I've decided that it was time to do the podcast. I think that you have one more question for me.
Yes. Like, what do you think, also, as in you want to start your podcast? Like, how would it be as in, what wanted you to start your podcast?
Adaptation, first off. I think that even when Mommy wrote the book, and I know that you haven't read it, and I know you have some feelings about that, but we'll get there. Don't rush the process. A lot of that stuff is things that will maybe scrape up some emotions, maybe scrape up some lack of understanding of some of those things that I went through. And when you're ready, when Dad and I have decided that you're ready to experience or encounter what some of those historical experiences were for Mom separately and for your sister and brother, you'll have that chance. So don't rush it, okay? It's not going anywhere, and neither am I. And you have a first-hand account of all of those things from myself and from your sister and from your dad, okay, and from a number of your family members. However, I think that it's important to share, right? And when I wrote the book, there were a lot of things that didn't get to go into Mommy's book. There were a lot of people and things on my journey that weren't as prepared as Mom was to share that story. And that's okay, because people come to that in their own way and in their own time, and sometimes not at all. And I had to accept that. So there were a lot of things that didn't make it into my book. Experiences with other people, encounters with other people, and that was the safe way to play it. But for a long time, I've felt like I didn't spend every dollar. And I didn't get everything that I could out. And sometimes you feel like it could have been done differently and it could have been done better. But this is my way of still being able to share. And adaptation, because this is the platform that most choose to share, that most choose to experience. So whether you have a story to tell or whether you want to hear a story being told, social media and the internet is the way that it's being done now. So I'll always love my book. I'll always still write down the things that I'm going through to help me work through it and cope with it. But now I can take those things and they can come alive on a screen. They can be shared with the people that I care about and love the most live. And that's sometimes where you get the rawness from. That's sometimes where you get the unapologetic truth, because it's how you feel. It's what you've experienced.
How to express your emotions, right?
How to express your emotions, absolutely. So here it is. And I feel like, obviously Mom has a medical journey too, right?
Yes.
That we've been up and down, up and down, up and down. And despite you thinking that Mom had an Adam's apple, it was okay to have one, right? I do not have an Adam's apple. And part of the muscle tension dysphonia is that, we've talked about Mom will one day eventually lose her ability to make sound waves and even speak. So while I have that voice left to speak, I'm pretty sure there's some things that God wants me to continue to share. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep sharing it. And just like with anything, what's for someone is for someone. What is not is not. So it's my hopes while we sit down and chop it up, while I sit down and chop it up with several other people who have touched my experiences, who have enriched my life, my journey, and my lessons, that we all continue to share together, and that it benefits even just one or two people that are watching or listening. So I have to take this time to say thank you for sitting down with Mom today and being able to share. I know that I've talked to you before about certain things, but there was some times when I was sharing my story that I never stopped to think about how you, your dad, your sister, and your brother would feel about me sharing my story, because really and truly, I'm also sharing a part of y'all's story. So it felt right and it felt good to be able to sit down and talk to all of you guys and receive your blessing, and not only receive your blessing, but have you guys sit down and share it with me. So I appreciate you and love you for that.
Yes, I love you too. And thank you for having me over here.
Absolutely, sir. That is all that we have time for today, you guys. Remember to comment, like, and subscribe so that you can get notifications for every show or podcast that we sit down and chop it up with you. Thank you, Christian Brown, and thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, and from Tanisha Brown with the Unapologetic Truth. Nessa! I don't know how to stop. Go get her. Nessa!
5 minutes isn't that bad. Yes, sir. Oh, she's in the shower. Yes, sir.
It's okay. It's okay.